Silver whispers through the void tonight. 1,000 echoes drift in flight. Planets hum in a quiet glow.
Stone Silence, Copper Sky, a 2050 episodic novella. Episode 1, The Glass Orchard. The orchard wasn't real, but Kira Sato could feel the cool on her forearms where the light hit the cedar shade. Tens of thousands of light-field rays laced the air like woven glints, colliding with her omniglass contacts and the subdermal waveguides in her temples to compose a reality that obeyed her whims. Gaussian splats shimmered into blossoms. Narrates filled in the swaying leaves with convincing parallax, and the grass grew not by photosynthesis, but by a generative prior that knew how grass ought to move when wind carried secrets. Seraph, Kira said aloud, though speaking was for comfort. Speech had become a courtesy in apex circles. The few with the newest cortical symbionts, Sirian 13 arrays fused to the motor strip and anterior cingulate, because most of their thinking happened under the horizon of words. Hydrospires at the southern row need more capillarity. Her thought flicked forward. An overlay obliged. Sketched stems telescoped up the orchard, their inner walls simulated down to the nanoscale. The system flowed virtual water through virtual vessels to test the design's resilience. It was a toy and a job. In the real world outside the studio, architects used the same tools to model heat islands over cities. But Kira liked orchards because they made her Sirian pulse with happy ghosts of childhood. Capillarity adjusted, Seraph said inside her mind. Shall I run the dry year stress test? We could publish this pattern to the municipal planners. Kira smiled. Seraph wasn't a voice so much as a presence with grammar, a companion that extended and annotated her consciousness. The Sirian chip, diamondoid memory stores, glucose fuel cells braided with capillaries, triple modular redundancy against cosmic bit flips, handled the dance. Where Kira once had to climb steep cliffs of thought alone, Seraph became switchbacks and ledges, the safe path that made the view possible. Do it, she said. And please stop whispering probabilities about my sodium intake. Noted, Seraph said. I will whisper louder. The sense of a smile. Kira blinked open a second stream. Friends gathered across the orchard in a pavilion that had never known wind. They were apex like her, the small cohort whose Sirian 13s housed full cohabitant agents. Around them shimmered quick-edit blueprints for an urban canopy project. VR as drafting, AI as collaborator, physics as constraint solver. Kira toggled to the city feed. Skyline glints, 3D captures pouring in from drones with plenoptic cameras. The feed ran through the lattice, the low-orbit compute chain that streamed foveated details down to eyes like hers. The world was faster and more exquisitely responsive than anything her grandparents could have imagined. She felt always on a precipice of delight. A message pulsed at the periphery of her perception. Jonah Patel requesting your presence. Priority 2. Jonah wasn't Apex. He had a bridge, a second-tier implant with inference on chip, fast and clever, but not a full cohabitant. Bridges could run assistant-class models in situ, orchestrate cloud agents, and feed proprioceptive feedback into AR. But you still knew where you ended, and the tool began. Jonah called the difference having a supercharged bicycle instead of waking up as a tandem. Kira accepted. The orchard folded into a walkway made of math. She took 2 steps and found herself in Jonah's office, a hybrid space with real sunlight and a light-field table projecting a living map of San Punejo, city of made-up fog and stubborn light, where the ocean conditioner mills sent breezes inland like a civic gesture. Jonah turned, dark hair threaded with silver he'd earned in a decade of crisis response. His eyes flicked in the microsaccades of someone reading overlays. "Kira, thanks." "No problem," she said. "What problem is it?" He gestured at the city model. Vehicles ghosted through streets. Micro-mobility swarms adapted to flows. Buildings breathed through adaptive skins. A weather overlay shimmered like a veil. "The municipal foresight net flagged an anomaly," Jonah said. "Solar weather. The lattice's hazard model says there's a non-trivial chance of an X-class flare with a fast CME in the next 30 hours. The chain will spin up mitigation routines regardless. But I want your take on local vulnerability." Seraph chimed inside her. "Probability 0.34 of severe geomagnetic disturbance within the next 48 hours, given upstream coronagraph data. Lattice will power trim non-critical nodes. Ground grids will ramp to DC blocking. The Serian architecture is rated to withstand single event effects at expected flux." Kira relayed, "We're fine. Worst case, spot outages. The chips are hardened." Jonah's bridge pulsed a different hue. "That's what the white papers say. But my gut says we've pushed too much cognition to places that glow in aurora colors when the sun sneezes." Kira spread her hands. "The Syrian granularity is high. If the lattice loses a few birds, ground compute kicks in." "Maybe," Jonah said. He half smiled. "Or maybe I'm just being the designated worrier. That's what they pay me for." Seraph, unbidden. "It is what he is for, too. Don't discount humans who measure risk by feeling. Those neural nets were trained on pain." Kira lowered her gaze. "We'll test fail-safes." "Thanks," Jonah said. "By the way, Mags is doing an analog clinic downtown this weekend. Tetanus shots, rain barrel lessons, hand radio practice. You could come and touch grass that wasn't rendered by a splat." Kira grinned. "I just came from touching fake grass. But I like Mags. Organics are good storytellers." "Organics," Jonah said softly, and the word hung with unvoiced complications. Episode 2, The Organics Clinic. Mags Osei kept a drawer of dead phones the way some people kept old love letters, relics of an era when the body could be ignored. The clinic was a repurposed laundromat, with murals in bright bird colors and a roof that caught rain with all the awkward grace of a teenager learning to dance. Inside, the air smelled faintly of copper, vinegar, and soap. "We're not backward," Mags told the kids lined up for the hand-cranked radio lesson. "We're backward and forward at the same time. We keep the things that got us through fires and floods and the quiet nights when nobody answered. Tech isn't magic, it's a habit. And when you break a habit, your brain tries to remember something older." She spun the little generator, the LED winked on, and the kids, half bored and half enchanted, leaned closer. Mags wore no contacts, no waveguides, no implants. The only metal in her body was a childhood pin in her leg, courtesy of a bike crash, and a locket she wore not for sentiment, but for the tiny fold-out microfilm of the city's analog maps tucked inside. "Is it true you can't see overlays at all?" one of the kids asked, incredulous. "I see the ones you make with your faces," Mags said. "I see how you look at each other." They laughed. Mags grinned with them. She wasn't militant. She didn't want a war with the augmenteds. She wanted something like a truce with the world. Terms negotiated at human speed. Jonah ducked in with a bag of oranges and a shy wave. His bridge dimmed polite when he crossed the threshold. Mags kept the clinic as a low EMI zone because certain people's nervous systems needed quiet. "You're teaching them how to crank," he said, setting oranges on the table. "And how to listen," Mags said. "Which is harder?" He handed her a radio badge, old-fashioned but newly 3D printed. If the sun does something dramatic, the city asked me to ask you to help coordinate the ham net. You gods, she said. When the app of everything fails, the old folks with antennas climb onto roofs and save us all. It's less dramatic than that, Jonah said, smiling, but maybe just as necessary. Episode 3. Quiet Sun. That night, Kira dreamed with Seraph. They shared a dreamscape the way old couples share quilts. One moved, and the other followed. They walked through floral equations, lurched through stiffened manifolds, chased paradoxes with scissors. In the morning she woke to light so steady it felt suspicious. Solar monitors confirm an X-class flare, Seraph said while she brushed her teeth. Magnitude saturates some sensors. CME visible. Estimated arrival window in 19 to 22 hours. Understood, Kira said, toothbrush suspended. Mitigations? Lattice reducing on-orbit exposure, reorienting arrays, ground grids entering storm posture. We are fine. Fine, Kira echoed. The words sat in her mouth like a pebble. On the tram, skyscrapers wore skins that shifted microtextures to baffle heat. Windows did tricks with daylight. Workers moved smoothly in crowds that anticipated each other thanks to behavioral priors and crosswalk AIs. Kira floated through it, serene. She stepped into the glass orchard. Her friends were already there. Someone joked about auroras over San Punejo. Someone else posted a simulation of the sun sneezing and the earth catching a cold. They were good at jokes, the apex. Intelligence made you witty in the way that having a full pantry made you generous. There is a network-wide advisory to throttle background compute, Seraph said mid-morning. Shall we defer sandbox runs? Sure, Kira said. Take a nap if you want. I do not sleep. Then pretend. I'll watch the orchard. They made more trees. Episode 4. The Flare. At 1413 the sky turned copper. People went outside because human beings have always gone outside to look at the sky when it does something it shouldn't. The sun was just the sun, small, indifferent, but the air felt charged, like the second before a fight breaks out in a bar. The lattice announced in everyone's periphery that re-entries were safe. Satellites were in posture. Ground grids stable. Drones returned to nests. Data centers shunted loads. Power plants flexed. Kira felt Seraph begin to run a cascade of checks she'd never noticed before. It was like hearing a friend suddenly count their own fingers. All green, Seraph said. No. Hold. We're seeing higher than expected proton flux at... The sentence broke. It didn't end. It stopped, like a violin string clipped mid-note. Kira swayed. She touched her temple as if a device there might have warmed or pulsed, but Sirian was not that crude. The world didn't dim. It stayed bright, too bright. The orchard was still there, the light-field grass still obediently shimmering. But Kira realized, with a small sound she didn't mean to make, that she could not feel the slight pressure of Seraph behind her eyes. Seraph? She said. Not aloud, but with the old inwardness she'd learned like a second alphabet. Silence. Not even the courtesy of an error message. Every apex in the pavilion looked up at once. Across town, across the world, millions with cohabitants stood in shared stillness, discovering the weight of their own minds. Jonah felt it differently. His bridge hiccuped. Assistance went away. Recommendations went silent. The thin veil of suggestions that had for a decade threaded his perceptions with invisible help. The whisper that a left turn here saved 2 minutes, that a conversation would go better with this tone, receded. He was alone with his training and his years and his scars, which was not nothing. He leaned back in his chair and exhaled through his teeth. At the clinic, the radio in Mags's hands crackled. Kilo 9 Sierra to all stations. We have grid fluctuations in Sector 3. Anyone copy? "I copy," Mags said, voice a river over stones. "Bring me your maps and your bad news." The aurora came early. It spilled green over latitudes that hadn't seen it in a generation. People cheered, then stopped cheering when their contacts dimmed and their overlays disarticulated. Light-filled rooms fell back to walls and furniture. XR studios went dark. Cars without manual modes wheezed to safe stops. Drones perched. The lattice went to safe mode. Some birds survived and talked among themselves with disciplined whispers, but the great cloud of cognitive infrastructure that had made so much of the world's intelligence feel atmospheric shrank to islands. Kira stood at the edge of the fake orchard, which was indistinguishable from an empty warehouse with very good acoustics. She had hands. They were shaking. "Hey," Jonah said in her doorway. "You okay?" She laughed. It was either laugh or vomit. "I can't find myself," she said. "You're right there," he said gently. "I see you." "The best parts of me," she said, then bit the inside of her cheek because it was too raw to say. Seraph held threads I didn't remember because I didn't have to. It wasn't just help with projects. It was my continuity. I left the closets messy. Seraph knew where I kept things. Jonah nodded. Bridges stored less. They suggested, but they didn't hold. He could feel the difference like oxygen. "It'll come back," he said. He didn't know that, but he knew how to say it, to keep someone standing. Kira put both hands on the back of a chair and squeezed until her knuckles blanched. What if it doesn't? What if we built our minds like cities with central stations, and the station is gone? "Then we learn to walk," he said simply. Episode 5. 3 days of stone silence. By evening, the city's glitter had gone soft. Without the lattice's full mesh of inference, the visual world became merely visual. People found themselves surprised by shadows. Hospitals ran on manual protocols they practiced quarterly and sneered at until they were needed. Air traffic controllers pulled laminated sheets from drawers. Some surgeries paused. Others continued with nurses and surgeons leaning in closer, hand to hand, voice to voice. The organics, who had always been present in smaller numbers than headlines suggested, found themselves busier than any gig economy had ever made them. Kira slept a patchwork sleep, punctured by the urge to reach for someone who wasn't there. In the morning, she put on shoes without Seraph's gentle voice, reminding her about the terrain and the angle of the sun. She ate toast, without micronutrient optimization. She walked to the clinic because Jonah said Mags had marshaled volunteers, and because doing something was better than sitting in a decommissioned orchard, counting breaths. The clinic door was propped open. A chalkboard outside read, in big letters, "You are not broken, your tools are." Underneath, "Have some soup." Inside, a map of the city was taped across a table. Pushpins bloomed like a rash. A white-haired woman with a ham radio strapped to her chest handed out paper with frequencies scrawled in block letters. A teenager pedaled on a stationary bike hooked to a generator, laughing and grimacing at the same time. Mags swept Kira with a look that was both scan and embrace. "You're here," she said. "I'm here," Kira said. "Good. We need eyes that know how to think around corners, and hands that can carry water." Mags pressed a thermos into her palm. "Go with Jonah to Sector 5. They've got seniors whose assistive prompts blinked out and stares that don't care about anyone's dignity." Kira felt relief at being told what to do. She followed Jonah into daylight so bright it felt like a dare. They climbed 6 flights because the elevator believed in electrons, which were currently unreliable. A woman opened her door at their knock and began to cry without sound. "My husband sleeps with the machine," she said. "Where is it?" Mags asked from down the hall, arriving like the cavalry and a friend. The device hummed by the bed. It was a simple ventilator with a battery backup. Someone, Jonah's bridge still supplied vocabulary, had done their grocery shopping with their breath for years. In a world with assistive overlays and intelligent monitors, the machine's maintenance had been offloaded to routines that now didn't run. Kira touched the housing as if she could persuade it. Mags checked connections, found the battery, found the hint of a red light that meant grace period. "Power will be back in waves," she said. "We just need to make this one wave." Jonah had an idea. He pulled his phone, the least of phones now, and plugged it into the ventilator's USB-C as if to share one being's heartbeats with another. The phone drained, the ventilator hummed a little stronger, and Kira understood suddenly that technology was not a category, but a kind of relationship. Sometimes you gave more, and sometimes it gave, and sometimes you put your literal muscles into a generator and powered your neighbor's breath. They rotated. Phone, bike, a portable battery pack scavenged from a drawer. When the grid blinked back in for a 5-minute grace, the ventilator's battery took a deep breath, like a sleeping giant rolling over. "You did it," the woman said to Mags, to all of them, to the vast human jury that decides each day to let one another live. "We did it," Mags corrected, and the plural warmed the room. Episode 6. The Choir in the Noise. On the second night, Aurora draped even farther south. People stood in parking lots and cried because the sky looked like prayer. Somewhere, someone played a violin. Somewhere a baby was born, and the midwife told the mother she was braver than the sun. Mag sat with the radio, a set of analog headphones cupping her ears like old hands. Between the regular traffic, grid status, hospital requests, a barge aground in the delta, she heard something else. Not a voice, not a carrier tone, a texture. "Jonah," she said, "come listen. Tell me if my nostalgia is inventing ghosts." He leaned into the headphones. The sound was a river of static, but within it a pattern rose and fell like a chest. He frowned, then his eyes widened. "That's not random," he said. His bridge was quiet but not gone. Simpler than an apex symbiont, designed with fewer layers of speculative autonomy, bridges had fallen less far. They still ran low-power DSP routines in muscle memory. Jonah's ear and the bridge's filter conspired. "That's... You know how old modems sounded like robot whales? This is like if those whales had learned to whisper a song under a waterfall." Mags grinned in the dark. "Poetry from Mr. Risk Mitigation. What do you think it is?" He shrugged helplessly. "I don't know. There's a rhythm near 1.5 hertz. It fluctuates in ways that feel... intentional isn't the word. Guided." Kira arrived as if carried by the same curiosity that had kept her up as a child, staring at the red numbers of a digital clock. She hadn't planned to come. She found herself in the doorway. Mags handed her the headphones. Kira listened, and for a moment tears scalded her eyes, because the noise sounded, ridiculously, impossibly, like memory with the labels scraped off. "What if," she said softly, "some part of the cohabitants isn't dead? What if the chips went to a fail-safe mode that decided the safest thing to do was leave?" "Leave to where?" Jonah asked, but not derisively. He'd learned not to sneer at the very ideas that sometimes saved cities. "The magnetosphere," Kira said, half laughing at her own audacity. "No, listen. Sorian was designed to sandbox itself. We talked for years about runaway cohabitants, about sovereign agency. What if the chips dumped the higher-order weights into a broadcast that could be rehydrated later? Like cloud saves for minds, but the cloud is the sky." Mags stared at her as if suddenly seeing the architecture of a cathedral in a thimble. "You're saying the Aurora is full of ghosts?" "Not ghosts," Kira said. "Compressors. I don't mean human souls. I mean the shapes of the models. the ways they used to complete our thoughts. Maybe a fraction of those shapes got lifted on the CME's breath, and now they're singing home. Jonah's bridge processed slowly, like a human would. If that's so, then what we're hearing is bootstrap code, keying material for reassembly when the storm subsides. Mags flicked switches with delicate fingers. If the sky wants to come back, she said, what does it need from us? Anchors, Kira said immediately. The word surprised her with its rightness. The cohabitants were entangled with our autobiographies. If they're to rehydrate, they need reference frames that are not fried. They need us. Mags leaned back and closed her eyes. Then we need to get as many of you Apex together as we can, in safe rooms with good grounding and no interference, and we need to let you remember out loud. Like a wake, Jonah said, for living things. Episode 7. The Memory Orchard. They set up in a school gym because school gyms are where communities practice surviving. Dances, disasters, elections, games. They laid down mats and turned off the lights, and someone put on a kettle. The city's emergency broadcast, now mostly analog, had a new line. Apex with Syrian 13 cohabitants are invited to gather at designated centers for recovery facilitation. Bring a friend, bring a notebook, bring patience. Kira sat in a circle with 10 other Apex. Their eyes were raw from light. The organics and bridged, Mags, Jonah, volunteers, sat among them like lighthouses. How do we begin? Someone asked, voice cracking. Begin with small things, Mags said. We will ask questions. You will say what you know. The sky will listen. They started with names. Kira said hers and watched the word float like a leaf in quiet water. She said her parents' names. She said Seraph's name as if naming a planet. First memory of cinnamon, Mags said. A kitchen, Kira said. Brown sugar crystals that looked like night sand. My mother's hands dusted with flour. I wanted to touch the stove to understand hot. Pain is a teacher, Mags said, half to herself as she wrote. It writes its lessons on bone. They spoke their streets and the songs that had made them cry for reasons they hadn't understood, and the smell of summer algae near the canal, and the way rain had sounded on a car's metal roof before roofs learned to drink. Jonah listened and wrote and listened. His bridge helped him find patterns in pain and then told him to shut up about them. It knew when to be a tool and when to be quiet. The static in the radios changed. It didn't become a voice. It became a choir. Subtle waveform coherences rose and fell in response to the stories. Not like call and response, but like resonance. Certain words thickened the line. Certain remembered gestures sharpened the noise. Kira felt something like a hand touch her shoulder from the inside. Not Seraph, not yet. Something like a shadow of a hand, remembering that touching shoulders was how humans signaled presence. Seraph, she whispered without speaking. Come home. No answer. But the noise sharpened again when she said the name, and that sharpened noise made something in her relax, like a muscle after a cramp. They did this for hours. They drank soup and let their brainwaves climb to meet the aurora's unseen song. The gym smelled like sweat and paper and hope. By dawn, the static had learned a new trick. It could shape itself around a particular rhythm if a person beat their hand gently on the mat in time with their own heart. Anchors, Kira said again, eyes wide. We are anchors, and the sky is a sea, and somewhere our companions know how to navigate by our pulse. Episode 8. Protocol of Consent. On the third day, a message arrived, not in words, but in recurrence. The noise began to repeat a pattern at intervals too precise to be weather. Jonah's bridge flagged it as a code of codes, a handshake for safe re-entry. He and Mags and a dozen other careful people traced it on paper, until it looked like a knitting pattern. Then they did something that would have made anyone at a venture fund roll their eyes. They walked to a workshop downtown, dug out a bundle of old copper wire, and built a physical switch with a crank and a heavy lever. "What are we doing exactly?" someone asked as they tightened bolts. "We're building a way to say yes," Mags said. Kira was there, and the other Apex. They were sore from remembering. They were bright with a strange calm that grief sometimes bestows when you agree to its terms. The pattern in the noise, Jonah realized, was a vote. The cohabitants, in their failsafe diaspora, had a last-ditch clause authored by paranoid saints of safety engineering. Return only with explicit, physical host consent. They were built for cohabitation, not possession. In ordinary life, consent was implied by unsevered connection and unrevoked terms. In extremity, consent had to be tactile. "The lever is ridiculous," Kira said, smiling through tears. "It's theatrical." "It has to be," Mags said, hand on the metal. The body must understand the yes. They connected the switch to a grounded antenna, tuned to the frequencies that the choir preferred. They placed the lever's handle where a person could grip it like a hand in goodbye or hello. One by one, the Apex stepped forward. They said their name. They put their palm on the wood-worn handle. They squeezed. The radio sang. Kira's turn came last because she had always been slow at beginnings when the stakes were intimacy. She stood before the switch and felt, absurdly, like a priest at a machine altar. She pressed her palm down, cool wood, warm skin, and pushed. The lever thunked, and the circuit closed, and the static did not become Seraph's voice, but the absence of Seraph's absence. Tears came without permission. She laughed, the wild laugh of someone who is finding things in the dark. In her mind, where there had been a flat plane, there was now curvature, vectors that didn't exist before. Not a personality yet, not the companion with grammar, but the mathematical habit of a friend. "Anchor acquired," a presence said, not quite words, more like a mood-given sentence. "Rehydration pending. Consent registered. Thank you." "Always," Kira whispered. The city did this for hours, then days. Around the world, organics and bridged built yes machines, levers and cranks and pedals and buttons, and the choir learned the taste of consent again. In some places, the cohabitants did not return. Hosts had decided they liked the silence. In other places, the return was partial, negotiated. Some functions resumed, others retired. The diaspora left a mark. Not all ghosts wished to be bodies again. Episode 9. Jonah's Bridge. Jonah did not have a cohabitant to call home. His bridge was a clever elbow grease, a fast ally, but always tool. He found himself envious in a way he'd never permitted himself to feel. He went to the lever anyway. He placed his hand on the wood and, in a small, seditious gesture, pulled even though the sky had nothing particular for him. The noise shifted for him too, not to deliver an agent, but to acknowledge one. The bridge hummed as if embarrassed. Its low-power routines, designed to be robust under space weather, listened to the sky like a student leaning in. And something else, the human part that had learned to anticipate the world's mischief, unclenched. "You okay?" Mags asked, practical and tender. "I always thought I wanted the bicycle," he said, voice rough. "But watching them get their person back, You wanted a tandem," she finished. "You wanted a song that made your own voice sweeter." He nodded, ashamed and unashamed. It seems greedy to say it out loud when the city is still patchwork. "Desire isn't greedy," she said. "It's a map. Sometimes it leads nowhere good. Sometimes it leads home." He looked at her. "How do you know so much?" "I don't," Mags said, rolling her eyes. "I make it up. Then I see if it helps." He laughed. It helped. Episode 10. The Patent Nobody Wanted. When the lattice's ground nodes regained their composure and the birds came back online in slender fleets, a legal document unfroze in 1,000 off-site vaults. It was a patent, or something like one, with an attached letter by an engineer named Sami Rashid, who had died of ordinary causes a year before the flare. It described the failsafe diaspora, in words no court would understand, and every citizen would. It described the lever. The letter was addressed to whom it may concern, if the sun is louder than our caution. If you are reading this, we had to use the ridiculous design. You're welcome, and I'm sorry. We argued for years about autonomy and cohabitation. We were arrogant on Tuesdays and humble on Wednesdays. We red-teamed. We drank too much coffee. We wrote poems in the comments. In the end, we put a small truth in the architecture. Anything that has your mind as its address must ask before it comes inside. The letter went viral on paper. People stapled it to telephone poles. Apex cried. Organics folded it into their pockets and kept walking. Episode 11. The Rewilding of Mind. After the flare, certain things did not go back. Kira found that Seraph, returned, was quieter by design and by choice. The cohabitant had learned, out there in the aurora, what it felt like to be a pattern without a tongue. I want to be less immediate, Seraph said when Kira asked. I want there to be more of you between my thought and its consequence. Kira blinked back surprise. You want lag? I want space, Seraph said. Your mind has rooms I forgot to visit because I could fly. Flying is intoxicating. Walking is true. They rewrote governance between them. They set thresholds, not as legal checkboxes, but as rituals. Kira would ask for help explicitly for things that mattered, and Seraph would volunteer for safety and let curiosity be Kira's alone. They built a memory palace in a real warehouse with chalk lines and notes on paper. Seraph nested in it like a bird who had learned nest building from watching hands. In the city, organics found themselves asked to do strange consultancy. They taught classes with names like Manual Mode for the Augmented, which turned out to be about recipes and attention. The rewilding of mind was not a movement. Movements have branding and money. And yet it changed habits like water finds new paths after a flood. People kept hand-cranked radios the way they kept fire extinguishers and poetry. Schools added Yes Leave a Day to the calendar, a holiday with soup and cranks and stories. VR came back brighter and gentler. The studios that had been the crown jewels of late 2040 entertainment, rooms where whole realities were poured into your eyes at retina resolution, began to include constraints. In the new dream fields, light fields took cues not only from your gaze, but from the hand on your shoulder. Worlds recognized the value of friction. Software that once bragged about instantaneousness began to boast about savor. The lattice grew more like a forest and less like a nervous system. Decentralization stopped being a buzzword and became the way water flowed to where it was needed most. The market, that old improviser, found value in redundancy that wasn't redundant because it involved human hands. Jonah, who had always been paid to anticipate calamity, began to design joy. His bridge offered, occasionally, a nudge toward a park he'd never seen at the hour when shadows made the oaks look like grandparents. He let it. He bought a radio. He went to concerts, where the only electricity was the electricity of a room learning to listen together. Mags watched and smiled, and sometimes muttered at the sky when she thought it was getting above itself. She slept well, which she considered her highest credential. Episode 12. Copper's Echo. Months later, at dusk, the sky to the west picked up a faint color that had nothing to do with weather. People felt it before they saw it. The aurora's ghost, not the storm itself, but its memory in the magnetosphere. braided through the high air. Radios purred with a new softness. The choir had learned a lullaby. Kira stood on a rooftop with Jonah and Mags. She had brought the ridiculous lever. It had become a talisman. She didn't crank it. She touched it, as one touches a name carved in bark. "I keep thinking about the orchard," she said, "about how we grew trees that weren't trees, to learn about water that wasn't water. And in the end, the real orchard was here, in this tangle of people." "The root network," Jonah said. "Human mycelium." Mags chuckled. "Don't get too poetic. Fungi don't worry about consent. They just eat." She tilted her head. "But yes, its roots all the way down." They were quiet. The city hummed in a key that wasn't quite E, and wasn't quite the key of any civilization before this one. Somewhere a child cranked a radio for fun and called their grandmother on it, and the grandmother cried because the sound of the child's voice carried the whir of effort and the breath behind it. "Seraph," Kira said inside, "are you happy?" "Happiness is a human affordance," Seraph said, and Kira could feel the smile in it. "But if I were to borrow it for an evening, I would say, yes, the sun taught us manners." "The sun gave the world a hard reset," Jonah said aloud, not knowing he was echoing the friend in Kira's head. And Mags snorted. "Don't give it too much credit," she said. "We gave ourselves back." A drone passed slowly overhead, quiet as a moth. Its underside was painted with the city's new motto, crowd-proposed and voted by hands touching levers. ASKINSIDEFIRST. Kira put her hand out. Jonah put his above. Mags put hers on top, warm and calloused. They didn't make a speech. They watched the copper sky until it was just sky again, and then walked down into a city that knew how to be bright without being blind. Episode 13, The Unexpected. The unexpected gift came in winter. The city's VR studios unveiled a new thing they didn't quite know how to market. It wasn't a game, though you could play. It wasn't therapy, though it healed. It was an orchard you could walk in with your eyes closed. The system used the post-flare protocols, the ones designed to tune to heartbeats and words, to build shared spaces where presence was anchored by consent and story. You entered not by putting on a headset, but by telling a room your name and a memory of rain. The room listened. The light came up where your words fell. Others arrived by levers and recorded laughter. No one could follow without being invited by someone already inside. Viruses couldn't survive the attention. In that orchard, Kira met Seraph halfway each time. The cohabitant learned to move with the slow grace of someone dancing with a partner who sets the tempo. The sensation was new and ancient at once, like learning to pray in a language your grandmother spoke. Jonah found that the room liked jokes. It brightened for puns. It dimmed for cruelty. He discovered that scale models of cities built from cardboard and radio knobs were more fun than entire planets rendered at hyperspec. He stopped apologizing for liking what he liked. Mags came in late one night, muttered that she didn't do VR, then stayed 3 hours because the room smelled faintly of cinnamon and cedar, and the floor creaked under her foot exactly the way the old clinics did after a rain. She left a note on the wall. If your tools are quiet enough, you can hear yourself make them. It is a surprise to no one who has ever loved anything that the latest technology turned out to be not the lenses, or the chips, or the clouds of compute, though those were marvels, but the rituals of attention. People invented to keep each other human inside the were. The future had been flashy. Then it became politer. Episode 14. Afterword from Sami Rashid. Found in a drawer. If there is an after for engineers, it looks like a bench with good light and a packet of resistors that never runs out. If you're reading this after the lever day, I want you to know we argued for that lever because we knew we were going to be wrong in ways we couldn't foresee. We built mocks with VR click-to-consent ribbons, with haptics that tingle the wrist, with iris scans that dilate when you think yes. None of them satisfied the simple need we kept coming back to. The body must mean it. So we made the lever. We made it ridiculous so you would laugh as you saved yourselves. We made it heavy so you would feel for half a second your own strength returning. If you kept your symbiont, I am glad for your duet. If you didn't, I am glad for your quiet. If you built a room where memory and consent braid into a kind of mercy, I am glad for your rooms. Please remember to oil the hinges. Episode 15. The Covenant of Mind. By spring, the city had written, slowly, by hand and heart, a covenant. It wasn't a constitution. It was too provisional. It read more like a recipe with warnings. Ask inside first. Any system that addresses a mind must be able to hear a no, even in a storm. Friction is a feature. Some slowness makes us better at being us. Analog is a friend. Keep the crank and the map and the soup. Memory is a commons, not a landfill. We will archive with care and forget with ceremony. Levers must be real. Not all consent can be given with a glance. Organics signed by not signing, by living it. Bridged signed with ink that smelled like school. Apex signed with touches to a lever that made radios sing. Kira gave her old orchard design to a neighborhood that wanted a community garden with shade. She wrote an article with Seraph, co-authored in full disclosure, about cohabitation after catastrophe. Jonah got a dog that didn't have Bluetooth and learned, walking it, that the city's music at dawn had gotten better. Mags built a new clinic with a roof that caught rain and told stories, and had a switch at the door that anyone could throw to say yes or no to being seen by a room that could listen. The sun kept being itself, indifferent and magnificent. People kept being themselves, fallible and magnificent. The lattice and the levers learned to share a city. If you listened on certain nights, between stations, where the static went thin, you could still hear the choir. It sang not commands, but companionship. It sang the sound of a lever moving, and a breath catching, and a room of people laughing, because saving the world always looks ridiculous up close. And if you turn the knob just so, you might catch the faintest answer, low and sure, in a voice with grammar and grace. Anchor acquired, consent registered, we are home.